The Where Our Minds Wander podcast may contain sensitive content and explicit language. Listener discretion is advised. Greetings, fellow wanderers, to the places our minds wander.
The house at the end of the dirt road, where disembodied voices whisper and strange sounds make the living shiver.
Where shadows lurk at the edge of the woods, just outside your back door. And mysterious lights speed beyond reason across the clear night sky.
Odd events throughout time that lead you down the rabbit hole.
I'm Wes.
And I'm Beth.
And this is Where Our Minds Wander. Hello and welcome to Our Minds Wander, all you fellow wanderers. Thank you for joining us.
Hi, everybody.
All right, before we get into tonight's story, we'd like to thank each and every one of you who went onto our Facebook page and followed us. We finally hit 100.
We made our goal because of you.
That's right, we finally did it. So, once again, thank you all. And we don't have any housekeeping tonight, so without any further ado, Beth's going to start us off.
Well, I'm really excited about tonight's episode because it's one of those well-known paranormal cases that's gotten even more intriguing as time has gone by. Even now, 40 years later, as new witnesses have come forward, there are new theories emerging, trying to explain what the heck really happened. There are those who actually experienced it, trained military officers who, to this day, disagree about what really happened. There are those who insist that what they encountered was undoubtedly a UFO, and then there are those who say that it was nothing more than atmospheric anomalies and misidentified light sources. Then there are others who didn't actually experience it, but who have come forward in either support of the UFO explanation, like former Ministry of Defense civil servant Nick Pope, or against it, like Forest Ranger Vince Thurkettle. And then there's the Air Force itself, which seems to be somewhere in the middle. But regardless, it all began the night of December 26th, 1980, in the woods between two American Air Force bases in Suffolk County, England. You may know it as Britain's Roswell, or you may know it as the Rendlesham Forest Incident. The Rendlesham Forest is almost 6 square miles of coniferous forest, wetland, and heathland, about 8 miles east of the town of Ipswich. In the 1940s, the British military operated several military bases in the area. The Royal Air Force Bentwaters, to the north of Rendlesham Forest, the Royal Air Force Woodbridge, to the southwest of the forest, and the Royal Air Force Lakenheath, southeast of the forest. But during the Cold War, all 3 bases were loaned to the American Air Force. Bentwaters was the home of the 81st Fighter Wing. Woodbridge became the home of the 78th and 79th Tactical Fighter Squadrons, which were part of the 81st Fighter Wing. So the 2 bases became known as the Twin Bases. Now, just a little bit more setting before we really get into it. Rendlesham Forest began to the east, just beyond the main runway at Woodbridge. The east gate of Woodbridge is where everything seems to have started. The forest stretches for about a mile beyond the east gate before ending at Capel Green and a farmer's field. Oxford Ness Lighthouse sits to the east as well, and at the time of the incident, December 26, 1980, it was considered one of the brightest lighthouses in the entire UK. All right, so, according to themorbidtourist.com, just after midnight, 2 patrolmen at the East Gate spotted unusual lights descending into the forest. They called it in, and soon a small team was assembled to go and investigate. On that team, among others, were Jim Penniston, John Burroughs, and Ed Cabansag. One patrolman was still stationed at the East Gate, and another was sent to the edge of the forest to wait while the team entered the woods and split up. According to a 2020 BBC article, John Burroughs said that once they were in Rendlesham Forest, they could see a beacon in the distance that was shining with green, red, and white lights. They also could hear a sound, quote, like a woman was screaming, and that they could hear the farm animals making a lot of noise. As they chased the beacon of green, red, and white lights several miles into the forest, a white light silently exploded, and then a red, oval, sun-like object lifted up through the trees and shot off towards the coast. Jim Penniston had a completely different experience. He and other soldiers reported seeing a triangular, cone-shaped craft about the size of a car, 10 feet across and 8 feet high, with 3 legs. It was surrounded by a mist. As he and another patrolman tried to get closer, they said that they could, but it was as if everything was moving in slow motion. According to InterestingEngineering.com, Penniston said, quote, I estimated it to be about 3 meters tall and about 3 meters wide at the base. No landing gear was apparent, but it seemed like she was on fixed legs. I moved a little closer. I walked around the craft, and finally I walked right up to the craft. I noticed the fabric of the shell was more like a smooth, opaque, black glass, end quote. And it was covered in hieroglyphs. Penniston reached out and touched it. The craft was smooth and warm to the touch. In response, this craft retracted its legs and easily maneuvered through the trees. The soldiers took off after it, chasing it into a field. The craft abruptly shot upwards into the sky, shining brilliant white lights down on the stunned soldiers. And by stunned, I mean literally stunned. All of the soldiers lost consciousness. When they came to, they weren't in the field anymore. They were back in the forest. When additional soldiers found them, they reported seeing tripod landing marks. The soldiers returned to the base and reported their findings. John Burroughs reported that, quote, we could see a beacon going around, so we went towards it. We followed it for about 2 miles before we could see it was coming from a lighthouse, end quote. Ed Cabansag said, quote, we figured the lights were coming from past the forest, since nothing was visible when we passed through the woody forest. We would see a glowing near the beacon light, but as we got closer, we found it to be a lit-up farmhouse. We got to a vantage point where we could determine that what we were chasing was only a beacon light off in the distance, end quote. According to the official Air Force account, the patrolman initially thought the lights in Rendlesham Forest was a downed aircraft. Astronomers, according to the Air Force account, attributed the lights to a piece of natural debris falling to the earth as a fireball. Around 4 a.m., local police were called to the scene. 2 Suffolk County officers arrived and determined that the strange lights were simply the Oxfordness Lighthouse. Inspector Mike Topless offered his take on it too, saying that he was aware that on certain nights, the lighthouse beams could make some strange light patterns in the sky. The following day, soldiers were sent out to Rendlesham Forest to see what they could find in the daylight. They reported broken tree limbs, burn marks on the trees, and strange indentations in the ground that measured 7 inches wide and 1.5 inches deep. The police were called out again, and this time they said that the indentations were simply made by animals. And perhaps it would have all been chalked up as one bizarre encounter that never happened again. Except it did, just 2 nights later. And this time, despite Deputy Base Commander Lieutenant Colonel Charles Halt wanting to put an end to all the rumors by going out on patrol himself, he became a witness. As soon as a call came in saying the lights were hovering over Rendlesham Forest once again, Halt grabbed a tape recorder and a Geiger counter and headed out with a patrol. He ran his tape recorder the entire time, and you can listen to it yourself online. It's a pretty interesting recording, to say the least. First, none of the men sound alarmed or freaked out, which they easily could have been based on what happened next. At one point, as Halt comes across the burnt trees, you can hear him say that it's all a bit eerie and quite strange. So, once Halt and his large patrol got to the original landing site, they did break into 2 smaller groups. Halt takes several radiation level readings and remarks that they are unusually high, about 10 times higher than the norm. He notices the white-streaked or burnt-looking trees and makes the comment about them looking eerie and strange. And then the second group calls in to say that they've spotted a red glowing light kind of dancing inside a pulsating fog. As Halt's group looked in their direction, the light was heading right for them, which, according to HowStuffWorks.com, was, quote, spewing forth a rainbow waterfall of colors. The other group reported a glowing, domed object hovering nearby, and they could see shadowy figures moving around inside it. Over the next hour, the 2 teams witnessed all kinds of strange things, including back in the farmer's field, where a pillar of yellow mist turned into what looked like a huge eye with a dark center. Not 1, but 2 unidentified craft appeared, sending down white beams of light that came within 10 feet of the soldiers. Other lights were seen, and other craft. One even looked like it had pieces hanging down from it. This craft hovered in the sky for an hour before taking off. At one point, Colonel Halt talks about another red, eye-like light coming towards him. He says, quote, "It looks like an eye, winking at you. Here he comes from the south. He's coming towards us now. Now we're observing what appears to be a beam coming down to the ground. This is unreal." End quote. Sergeant Adrian Bustinza, a security police commander who investigated the incident at the time, said, quote, "When I arrived at the scene, it was going in and out through the trees, and at one stage it was hovering." During all of this, the soldiers were well aware of the Oxfordness Lighthouse. Its light was not the lights they were seeing, and certainly couldn't explain the multiple unidentified crafts. Halt described everything that he and his men saw in a report to the Ministry of Defense, as well as submitting his audio tape from that night. In his report, he also mentions 3 red lights in the sky about the size of stars, 2 to the north and 1 to the south. They remained visible for 2 to 3 hours and seemed to beam down streams of light from time to time. The Ministry of Defense determined that since it was all nothing except the Oxfordness Lighthouse and some bright stars, that there was no threat to national security, and therefore it required no investigation. Colonel Halt has stated over the years that he felt as if he had witnessed several UFOs, and the MOD covered it up. The MOD has stated that despite giving several other servicemen the opportunity to corroborate his memo and the tape, none of them did. Woodbridge Base Commander Colonel Ted Conrad said as recently as 2010 that, quote, "We saw nothing that resembled Lieutenant Colonel Halt's descriptions, either in the sky or on the ground." And, quote, "We had people in position to validate Halt's narrative, but none of them could." End quote. And yet, according to HowStuffWorks.com, when U.S. Senator James Exon heard about the incident, he launched his own inquiry. Although he never revealed his findings, he did say that he learned, quote, "additional information that ties the Rendlesham case to, quote, other unexplained UFO incidents." On the flip side, Base Commander Ted Conrad went so far as to suggest that it was all just a hoax. Because, in the middle of winter, soldiers and their colonel have nothing better to do than to try to hoax everybody. But in 2018, British UFO researcher Dr. David Clark reported that it could have all been a prank. Apparently, in August of 1980, the British Special Air Service, or SAS, parachuted into RAF Woodbridge as a security test of the base. Woodbridge detected the parachutes, interrogated, and beat up the SAS men. They mockingly called them unidentified aliens. And so, according to Clark, the SAS soldiers decided to get revenge by making Woodbridge think that real aliens might attack. They allegedly used colored flares and black helium balloons attached to remote-controlled kites to pull off all of the things that I just told you about. But there's more to add to the puzzle. In a BBC article from 2020, a former forestry worker named Vince Thurkettle was chopping wood in Rendlesham Forest one morning in late December of 1980 when a car pulled up. Out stepped two men in their 30s, both dressed in suits. One of them asked him if they could ask him some questions, the first of which was if he'd been outside the night before. Thurkettle said that he had not been outside. When they kept asking if he had left his house and he kept insisting that he hadn't, he eventually asked why. One of them replied, quote, "Oh, there's a report of some red lights in the forest. We're just checking." Then they proceeded to ask him several more questions before very abruptly saying, "Oh, well, fair enough. There's probably nothing in it." They got in their car and left. Timing-wise, this was 2 weeks before Halt wrote his memo about the Rendlesham Forest Incident for the MOD. Thurkettle had to ask his boss what the heck was going on, and when he found out it was an alleged UFO incident, he asked to see where it had allegedly taken place. Thurkettle claims to have been rather disappointed. He said it was nothing but 3 rabbit scrapes that were roughly in a triangle, and that broken branches in a forest means absolutely nothing. He also recognized the burn marks on the trees as something else entirely, axe marks, and he even knew who put them there, a forest ranger named Bill Briggs. Thurkettle absolutely does not think any part of the Rendlesham Forest Incident is alien at all. He thinks that the men who came to see him were newspaper journalists, and he thinks the American soldiers simply saw the Oxfordness lighthouse. What intrigues him most about the two men's visit is that they came to question him 2 weeks before anyone was supposed to know about the incident, which means somebody leaked something somewhere. But speaking of the lighthouse, this is an interesting side note. On Colonel Halt's tape, when he mentions seeing an unidentified light flashing in the sky, he indicates that it's flashing every 5 seconds, which was the flash rate of the lighthouse. So, I want to go back to Sergeant Jim Penniston for a little bit. He was the soldier who said he actually touched the craft that was covered in hieroglyphs. But we'll get into that after this quick break. Hey, did you know? Halley's Comet, arguably the most well-known comet, won't be visible again until 2061. But maybe by then, we'll be calling it something else. The comet, which is named after astronomer Edmund Halley, was discovered by him way back in 1705, when he predicted that it would return in 1758, which it did. But recently it was discovered that an English monk named Aylmer of Malmesbury actually discovered the same comet back in the year 1066, which means good old Aylmer discovered Halley's Comet 600 years before Halley. So what now? Do we keep on calling it what we've been calling it since 1705? Or do we start calling it Aylmer's Comet? I guess we've got 35 years to figure it out. Who'da thunk it?
All right, we're back. And I want to pick back up with Jim Penniston, the American soldier who said that he touched the UFO in Rendlesham Forest. Pennison claimed that years after he touched the craft, he was still somehow telepathically connected to it because he was suddenly inspired to write down 16 full pages of binary code. When it was decoded, the message read, quote, "Exploration of humanity continues beyond 8100. Evolution not optional for planetary survival. The Great Awakening nears consciousness, must expand or the chain fractures. We return to warn from where you will be if you choose the path origin year of 8100. Return coordinates sealed in ancient stones. Advance or perish, the choice is now." End quote. There are also allegedly geographical coordinates for several ancient sites, including the Great Pyramid at Giza, the Nazca Lines in Peru, the Temple of Apollo in Greece, Sedona, Arizona, and the mythical island of High Brazil, a place that we covered in episode 188. Some people who believe that the Rendlesham Forest Incident was a definite UFO encounter are intrigued by the part of the message that says origin year 8100, because they speculate that the UFO encounter wasn't alien at all, but future humans traveling back in time. Skeptics still insist that the entire encounter was nothing more than logical everyday events that were simply misinterpreted by everyone involved. They argue that a meteor, a lighthouse, and the star Sirius account for all the lights in the sky. Rabbit scrapes and a forestry worker's hatchet marks account for everything on the ground. But on the flip side, in 2015, Colonel Halt announced that he had recently obtained written statements from Bentwaters radar operators confirming that they had tracked unusual and unidentified objects on the radar during December 26th to the 28th in 1980, something that they had never admitted to before because they wanted to wait until they had retired. Colonel Halt said, quote, "I have confirmation that Bentwaters radar operators saw the object go across their 60-mile, 96-kilometer scope in 2 or 3 seconds, thousands of miles an hour. He came back across their scope again, stopped near the water tower. They watched it and observed it go into the forest where we were." No matter what you believe about the Rendlesham Forest Incident, just 5 years ago, a dog walker had their own weird sighting in the forest and managed to record it on their phone. It's an interesting video. It shows a ball of light circling a military helicopter before it flies around in multiple directions. The helicopter turns abruptly and flies back the same way it came. But the ball of light continues to zoom around it in all directions before shooting off. And what makes all of this even more intriguing is that the Rendlesham Forest Incident wasn't even the first time UFOs were said to have been encountered around the Twin Bases. There was also the Lakenheath Bentwaters Incident of 1956. The Rendlesham Forest Incident might be the most well-known UFO encounter in England, earning the nickname Britain's Roswell. But it wasn't the first time strange things were allegedly caught flying over the Twin Bases and nearby Lakenheath. There's also the lesser-known event of 1956, known as the Lakenheath Bentwaters Incident. August 13, 1956, was a clear, dry night. It was perfect for spotting shooting stars in the night sky, especially since there were a lot of them that night as part of the Perseid meteor shower. But what happened beginning around 11:30 p.m. was so unusual that the incident was investigated by Project Blue Book and analyzed by the Condon Committee. It began at Bentwaters, when ground radar picked up an unidentified radio echo about 35 to 30 miles east of the airfield. According to Grokpedia.com, the craft did not have an identifiable transponder signal, so they kept an eye on it. The signal suddenly shot northwest at a speed estimated around 4,000 miles per hour. It soon disappeared off the radar. At the radio tower, airmen could actually see the object. They described it as a luminous streak of light, and it was so unusual that they soon contacted nearby Lakenheath. At Lakenheath, they were seeing it too, along with some other strange lights. The ground crew there described multiple luminous lights making all kinds of sharp turns and sudden stops before they'd shoot off in a completely different direction. Then the multiple lights came together and merged into one large light. They were also tracking the crafts on radar, which were puzzling to the radar guys. Meanwhile, a transport aircraft reported a, quote, blurry light passing directly below them at an incredible speed, traveling from east to west. As the two bases communicated, they decided to send out some planes to go see what the lights were. Two Venom aircraft took off from RAF Waterbeach, and Bentwaters sent out a T-33. One of the Venom pilots, Squadron Leader Anthony Taft Davies, reported that as he approached the latest radar hit, all he could see was a star. As the ground control told him where to go to get closer to the target, he just kept seeing the same stationary star. The second Venom pilot reported the exact same thing, except the star he could see was behind his aircraft and seemed to be following him for about 10 minutes before this star suddenly stopped midair, turned at a 45-degree angle, and shot out of his sight.
Stars don't usually do that.
Yeah, it's a bit odd. They were forced to return to base shortly after due to engine trouble. On the T-33, Lieutenants Charles Metz and Andrew Rowe reported that they saw nothing except a single bright amber-colored star that may have been the planet Mars. Over the next 3 hours, into the early morning of August 14th, both Lakenheath and Bentwaters continued to track weird lights on both radar and on the ground. These lights were traveling anywhere from 400 miles an hour to 4,000 miles an hour. Again, the lights seemed to stop abruptly, in midair, and then take off at incredible speeds. Around 1:55 a.m., one radar hit showed a target passing directly over one of the bases at just 2,000 feet, going 18,000 miles per hour. It maintained this speed for about 60 miles before disappearing. Around 2 a.m., when one of the craft was showing up on radar as sitting 7,000 feet above the ground, additional Venom fighters were sent out. Despite searching for 45 minutes, neither pilot nor the flight navigators could find the target. They could see the targets, but their planes just couldn't do what the lights were doing, and they certainly couldn't keep up or even get close enough to see what they were dealing with. They were also seeing these lights on the ground too, of course. Airmen reported yellowish streaks of light and pale orange glows, but absolutely no sound. Back in the radar towers, airmen like John Vicar and Sergeant Wenery reported erratic flight paths and no IFF response or transponders. They tracked craft covering great distances in mere seconds, some as fast as 12,000 miles per hour. Interestingly enough, other than the airmen, no one else except one witness came forward to say that they had seen anything, although he didn't come forward until decades later. John Killock, a witness who spoke to the Daily Express in 1978, said he was with a group of people who all saw fast-moving lights in the sky of August 13th being chased by a Venom. But he's the only civilian to ever come forward publicly. Project Blue Book did take an interest in the event, and later it was featured in the Condon Report, which anyone can read for themselves on the CIA government website. The Condon Report, in case you're wondering, was done by the University of Colorado between 1966 and 1968. The Condon Committee, named for lead physicist Edward Condon, was funded by the U.S. Air Force and was a scientific study of UFO reports provided by Project Blue Book. The committee came to the conclusion that UFOs did not merit any further study and led to the termination of Project Blue Book, which makes the case study in the Condon Report, written by G.D. Thayer, all the more interesting, because Thayer wrote, quote, "In conclusion, although conventional or natural explanations certainly cannot be ruled out, the probability of such seems low in this case, and the probability that at least one genuine UFO was involved appears to be fairly high."
Wow.
Yeah, that's saying a lot.
Yeah.
Now, to be clear, Thayer was saying that there was some sort of material object flying around Bentwaters and Lakenheath that could not be identified. He is not saying that it's extraterrestrial. However, he concluded, quote, "This is the most puzzling and unusual case in radar visual files. The apparently rational, intelligent behavior of the UFO suggests a mechanical device of unknown origin as the most probable explanation of this sighting. However, in view of the inevitable fallibility of witnesses, more conventional explanations of this report cannot be entirely ruled out."
Huh.
Skeptic and reporter Philip Klass believed the whole incident was explained by simple radar malfunctions at both Lakenheath and Bentwaters. But he also said, quote, "A few things are worth pointing out in the Condon Report summary. First, the possibility that meteors might have accounted for these events seemed to be easily ruled out, and it was so discounted by early investigators. Number two, visual mirage is ruled out by the large angles, i.e., simultaneously seen over a control tower and under an aircraft, at which the UFOs were observed, and by the manner and directions of movement. Number three, anomalous propagation of radar seems equally unlikely as an overall explanation."
Huh. So, I just want to make sure I understand. So this reporter, who's a skeptic, Philip Klass,
Right.
said that the whole thing was explained by radar malfunctions happening at both of those air bases. But then he says it can't possibly be meteors. It can't possibly be visual mirage because it was seen at so many different angles at the same time. And then the anomalous propagation of radar seems equally unlikely. So...
He's kind of contradicting himself a bit.
Right.
He's got a conundrum going on for himself.
And, okay.
I don't think the radar towers
are malfunctioning at both bases at the same time.
Exactly.
Okay.
And I have more to prove that.
Okay.
In 1978, Flight Lieutenant Freddie Wimbledon came forward and said that at least one thing needed to be mentioned. Wimbledon had been on radar controller duty at RAF Neatishead that night. Neatishead is about 45 miles from Lakenheath. He said that he had been the one telling the two additional Venom planes where to go to intercept the targets. He said that the targets were being tracked simultaneously by 3 raiders on the ground and by one in one of the Venoms, not just at supposedly malfunctioning Bentwaters and Lakenheath, but at Neatishead.
Wow. So they're supposedly having some sort of radar malfunctions at Bentwaters and Lakenheath, but this dude's at a completely different base, and he's saying he was the one telling the pilots where to go.
Right. So he was directing this Venom where to go.
Right. So they were seeing it at his name was Wimbledon. They were seeing it at Neatishead too.
Exactly. What are the chances that all 3 bases were experiencing radar malfunctions? Not likely. Well, recently, when 4 British Fortean researchers looked into the 1956 case, they pored over every official document that they could find. They noted that all 6 pilots sent to scramble the UFOs reported not making any visual contact with any aircraft, and that they were all certain that they were chasing after a stationary light source. 2 hours later, then Freddie Wimbledon claims that he was in contact with them.
What?
Yep, you heard that right. The 23rd Squadron, which had sent the planes out, determined that the radar was picking up, you guessed it, a weather balloon.
This is in the official documents.
Yes. Another explanation offered by the Fortean group, based on the reports that they read, was that perhaps it was all a radar jamming and deception test, which would have affected all 3 bases. But it's kind of funny to me, ironically so, not ha-ha funny, that 2 major UFO incidents happened in the same area, over the same set of bases, and that all these years later, we're still questioning the professionalism and abilities of dozens of highly trained soldiers and their commanding officers.
Can we back up for just a second?
We can go anywhere you want.
I think I want to go to Rendlesham Forest. But anyway, there's a whole UFO walk there now. Did you know that?
No, I did not.
Yeah, there is. There's like a pathway with a marker, and
it doesn't surprise me.
Yeah. Why
wouldn't there be?
Right. But so to go back to these Fortean researchers, the third explanation that it was that it was some sort of jamming and deception test that was being done at all 3 bases.
Right.
Like jamming their radar.
That makes absolutely no sense to me. Somebody in high command would have to know that this is going on. Because what if something's coming into your radar that you're not aware of, that you should be?
Right. While the jamming's going on.
It could really create some big problems.
And I'm also thinking they're sending all of those very, very expensive planes out for nothing.
Right. Anything could happen to one of those when they're in the air, scrambling to intercept it.
One of them had engine trouble and had to come back.
Right.
I don't think it was a jamming and deceptions.
It was a weather balloon, just like Roswell.
Right.
So, what do all of you think? Were there UFOs flying over in 1956 and then again in Rendlesham Forest in 1980?
And again 5 years ago, if you look at that video of the light flying around the helicopter.
Yeah.
And what I found so interesting about that video was that the helicopter's following the light as it's zipping all over, and then the helicopter literally turns tail and flies away.
Yeah.
It's very strange.
It's pretty cool. I have no doubt in my mind that there are things that are out there that we don't know about. And I would say, if I had to guess myself, I would say about 97% of them are just nuts and bolts aircraft that are misidentified. But then there are those that we just can't explain. I mean, we've seen the Tic Tac video. We've seen many videos. Because my thought is, there is a lot of stealth technology out there that we don't want anybody else to know about. And, we fly them at night.
Right.
And people see these lights. And, of course, you're going to think it's a UFO. Some of them could even be these large triangles that look like motherships. We don't know.
Right. And in the 90s, when I saw the UFO all throughout Dutchess County, when there was the big UFO flap in Dutchess County, that was the official explanation the whole time was, it was the stealth bomber, and that's what people were seeing. But when you look at pictures of the stealth bombers at night and what people were reporting they were seeing, they look different. Nothing alike.
No. But I have no doubt in my mind that there's technology that's ours that is beyond our imagination.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes we get a glimpse of it
Mm-hmm.
and can't make any rational explanation for it. We can't believe our eyes.
Right.
And then nobody else is going to either unless they've seen it too.
Right. Yeah. You have to see it to believe it, I think.
But I think there was something definitely going on in Rendlesham Forest.
Well, yeah, you think about, right, there was at least 4 bases, if not 5 or 6, that the British had built, all in that same area, that all served different purposes during World War II.
Right.
And then when we take them over, I forget what my point was going to be. I had a point.
That suddenly these things happen?
Yeah. I mean, when you have that many bases close together, I mean, I don't know.
I don't know either.
I don't know what my point was. I had one.
Well, I just let you run with it because I don't know what your point is either.
No, nobody does. Maybe somebody listening can tell me what I was going to say.
It's as mysterious as the UFO that they've seen, that they were chasing.
All right, everybody. If you would like to know more about the Rendlesham Forest Incident or about the Lakenheath Bentwaters Incident, you can always check our sources in our show notes. And a good starting off point is the audio of Colonel Halt and that video that you were talking about from 5 years ago.
Right.
That one's
We
pretty
saw
cool.
a documentary on this too.
We did.
Yes, we did. Quite a few years ago. I'd say like 6-7 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I'd highly recommend checking out the audio file. You can find it online. It's pretty interesting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You know, I'm sure a lot of you heard of this case before and probably know quite a bit about it. And if you haven't heard the audio, like I said, check it out because it's worth listening to.
Mm-hmm.
It helps you make your own decision
Yes.
a little bit. All right, with that said, join us again next week for an all new episode of Where Our Minds Wander.
See you soon. Thank you for joining us. We look forward to traveling with you again to the places where our minds wander.
If you like what you heard, please take a moment and provide us with a 5-star rating and a comment on your favorite listening platform. It really helps us move up the list and become more visible on the podcast charts so new people can find us.
And thank you all for your continued support.
See you next week for an all new episode.